And we also are in the erosion control plan review arena also when it comes to urban development. Anything over 1 acre in size when it comes to urban development requires a plan review, and we and our staff and partners reviewed over 2,300 plans last year. The next slide talks about some of our agricultural programs. These are 2 grants we were recipients of, water quality grants, in the past year through a competitive allotment through Georgia EPD. We'll be working in the Wilcox County area, in the Cedar Creek, Folsom area, Folsom Creek area, to address livestock and row crop production and installing practices to improve water quality there. And then the Nutrient Management Planning Initiative is a process where we'll be working with poultry producers, updating their nutrient management plans and keeping them in step with federal and state permits so that they are using their nutrients appropriately, and hope to develop that not only just in a couple of areas in Setting Down Creek and in the Altamaha Basin, but statewide with poultry producers. So those are some of our accomplishments to this point in the year. But as it relates to budget reductions in our budget, those start on the next page. If you look on your tracking sheet, line 43.1 relates to the slide you have before you, a reduction in our administration program of $6,793. And operating expenses, we would handle that through travel reductions, motor vehicle expenses, and supplies that will be reduced. We'll continue to reduce the amount of overnight stays that our staff are able to spend overnight. We've been doing that for quite some time, and this will be another reduction in that. So a little over almost $7,000 in our administration program. The next slide combines the cuts from your tracking sheet lines 43.2, 43.3, and 43.5. If you add all of those reductions up, it totals $58,559. Those will be areas where we will be replacing state funds with other funds, which will be grant funds for personal services of existing staff, and leaving 1 regional representative position vacant in our Conyers office. As I mentioned, we're the recipient of 2 grants. As I mentioned a while ago, we'll use that funding to fund these folks that have been funded with state funds. We'll use federal funds. It's a short-term fix. It'll prevent us from hiring part-time coordinators, which is what our original plan was with the grant funds, but will allow us to meet the budget reduction. In our Conyers office, we've assigned the existing duties to existing staff, and we'll continue to do that. And as we talk more about fiscal year 14, you'll see some of those reductions also. But that's $58,559. The last reduction is in our water resources and land use planning program on the next slide. On your tracking sheet, it's line 43.5.2. This is a reduction of almost $22,000 related to our ARC geographic information system software. This is our mapping software that we use in our metering program and also our water conservation projects, and also allows our the public that access our website to see the mapping effort that we have going. We're going to reduce our annual software maintenance in this year because we've already paid for this year's service. We'll be able to take that reduction in the amended fiscal year 13. Future fiscal years will be discussed at our fiscal year 14 budget hearing, but this is a reduction in fiscal year 13 of almost $22,000. Those are all of our reductions, Madam Chair and committee members. Our budget is basically half state funded, half federal funds. We have about a $5.1 million proposed budget for this budget cycle with these reductions. We have 38 staff members, 29 of which are state budgeted, 9 which are federal and other funded, or some combination of that. So that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair, unless there are any questions.
Do I have any questions from the committee or comments? Representative Blank.
Back on this water metering.
Yes, sir.
If I recall right, we had some changes where the permits are not being utilized on a certain period of time. They were put into a different category.
There was some legislation passed in the Georgia Water Stewardship Act a couple of general sessions ago that classified permits as active, inactive, or not in use. That's a function of EPD. Our meters, as it would make sense, would be on those that are active predominantly. If they're inactive, we don't want to be placing a meter.
The active permits, what percentage of them do we have metered now?
We've metered, there's about 21, in round figures, probably 22,000 permits out there. We've metered about half of them, or 55%.
Are they uniformly spread throughout the state, or in more concentrated?
Predominantly southwest and southeast. In this part of the state, there's probably 300 that need to be metered north of Macon.
Okay.
That have not been metered at this point.
The data that you've collected so far,
Yes, sir.
How does it compare with some of the figures that had been thrown out there about the amount of water that was being used in agriculture?
Much less compared to what was originally thought. Some predictions that were made early on were based on producers pumping 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That does not occur in today's world. I don't know that it ever occurred. But with the cost of diesel and electricity and other things, it's only used when needed, and we're certainly finding that. And a lot of producers that pump surface water in dry times don't have enough water to make it through the season. So they'll get halfway through a season with light to pump.
It was also based on all of the permits.
Yes, sir, all permits pumping, correct.
A lot of them were only used in relation to some rotations and stuff.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And so I had not seen a lot of publicity on the fact that this usage is much less than what there originally had been used as the amount of
Yes,
water ag was using.
Yes, sir. We'll try to do a better job publicizing that.
That would be good.
Appreciate the question.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Well, I certainly do appreciate all the hard work you put in this budget and how you've really been able to move your figures around or whatever you did. But thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We appreciate the opportunity to work with the committee.
And any way we can help you, we appreciate the job you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you.
There are no other questions. Thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
And we will see you on the 14 budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Public Service Commission. Thank y'all we're so glad to have Chuck Eden, our new chairman of the Public Service Commission. Thank you so much for coming. And the Chief Budget Office, Terry Prickett, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we've all got a paper from the Public Service Commission. Josh, did you get one?
It's pretty thick.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much for having us, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. As you mentioned, I'm here with our Chief Budget Officer, Terry Pritchard, our Director of Utilities, Tom Bond, and our Executive Director, Deborah Flanagan. And we're going to try to make this presentation fairly brief. It's a one-page synopsis. The 2013 budget, as you see in tracking sheet line 39.3.1, we received a 3% cut in personnel services, and then another 0.7% cut in facilities protection. If you don't know what that is, that's the pipeline safety. They ensure the integrity of the pipelines and the safety aspect of it. So that amounts to a total of 3.7%. One thing to note is this is the first time that facilities protection has been cut. It's largely funded by federal dollars, roughly 80%, and the matching dollars are done kind of in a sliding scale. And we'll obviously lose those offsetting dollars, and if we start to move down on the scale, the federal government actually reduces the matching, because I guess the policy behind that is they feel if the state's not investing enough money in the pipeline safety, then they ought not to be either. The commission, we all, the commissioners and the commission, we understand that the state's in a difficult position right now. We want to be team players and understand that the budget must be balanced. And I think that we can handle the 3%. And I know you don't want to go off on 2014, but I do have to foreshadow that we've gotten absolutely hammered in 2014, and we'll have that conversation when it's appropriate. But that's what gives us grave concern is that budget. Since 2008, which I guess would be high watermark for the state budget, our budget has been reduced 23%. So it's not that we haven't made cuts over the years, And again, as much as it hurts and we don't want to, we understand that budgets must be balanced. Give you an idea, I think most of you realize what the Public Service Commission does, but we have a number of trained and professional staff. We have engineers, accountants, attorneys. We do very intense rate cases. If you came over to one of our hearings, you would think it was very similar to a courtroom, where witnesses are cross-examined and our staff puts up a case. And just to give you an idea of what we have coming up this year alone, we've got Georgia Power's Integrated Resource Plan. That's where they submit their 20-year plan to the Public Service Commission as far as capacity, and we go over coal plants and natural gas plants, nuclear plants, and kind of mutually decide what the capacity investment needs to be over the next 20 years. So that's obviously a very intensive case. We also have a Georgia Power rate case coming up this year, which I'm sure will attract quite a bit of attention. There's an Atlanta Gas Light capacity supply case coming up this year as well. That will attract lots of attention. And of course, obviously, there's the ongoing monitoring of Plant Vogtle, which is a $14 billion project, by far the largest investment going on in the state of Georgia right now. And quite possibly it might be the largest construction project going on in the country. I haven't really analyzed it, but it's a huge project that requires constant monitoring. We have 6 hearings a year alone on Plant Vogtle, approving those costs or disallowing them if they're ruled imprudent. And this all obviously requires quite a bit of diligence and review on our part. Part of the problem is the way that the budget, the way that it was structured, is that 3% cut is largely going to come out of utility personnel services, and those are the folks that focus on things like Plant Vogtle, the rate cases, the capacity. I mean, I'm sure all of you have read about it in the papers. I mean, we're under enormous pressure right now, especially a coal-dependent state like Georgia. The federal government, the EPA, is coming out with more and more regulations. You probably have read that we've made some difficult decisions here to shut down coal plants versus, making tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in environmental upgrades just to see the federal government 5 or 10 years later change the rules of the game on us again and find out those investments are now outdated. And so we're making some very difficult decisions, and obviously we need to have the staff and the expertise to support us in there. So in conclusion, the Public Service Commission remains a key partner in Georgia's economic growth. We work very hard to make the needed investments in capacity, but also keep a sharp eye on our rates. Our rates here in Georgia are extremely competitive, both in the Southeast and certainly nationally. That's obviously something we're well aware of, the fact that manufacturers look at our electric rates when they're evaluating different states, and we're quite frankly we're very proud of our rates and the investment that we've okayed for approval. And Georgia, we don't have the blackouts and brownouts that you see in other areas of the country, where politicians just don't have the political fortitude to make those investments in capacity that we've done here in Georgia. So bottom line, we want to be in a position where we can be proactive, and we're not simply put in a position of being reactive. And again, I appreciate your time, and I'm willing to take any questions from the committee.
Do I have any questions? Representative Roberts.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, did y'all have any say, or this was basically OPB's recommendations, y'all have any say in the cuts or anything that y'all were given?
I'm not aware of them. I mean, do we have any? No, we didn't have any. And part of the problem is, Terry was just mentioning to me a couple days ago that he's been with the commission now for 5 years, and he's on his 10th analyst at the OPB. So it's hard. I mean, we brought some folks out to Vogtle to kind of show them what we do, but it just happens to be a high turnover area.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman.
And in 5 years that you've had 10 different analysts.
I didn't have that many girlfriends in college.
had a question on 39.3.1, the reduction in personnel funds, the 238,000. What is that?
That's a basic math equation, 3% of our state allotments. We did have 3 people retire in November and December, and that's going to help us get to the 3% number. We're not backfilling those people because we do not have the budget. We have the allotted headcount, but not the funding to fill those jobs. So in order to get the 3%, we just have to hold those jobs vacant.
That 3% is approximately 3 positions at $50,000 plus benefits. So.
Okay. Representative Roberts. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So in other words, right now through attrition, you've met this 3%.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's obviously not every agency has this issue, but those were people with great expertise and skill sets that we're not able to replace.
What did they actually do, if you don't mind me asking, those 3 people that retired? What were their jobs there? Do you remember?
Well, the first one that comes to my mind is a fellow by the name of Dan Searfoss, who I can't remember his exact title, but he'd been with the commission for 30 years and was instrumental in the electric section of the commission. And I've heard he's doing a little consulting work now for utilities, which I don't begrudge him at all for that. But a lot of our staff members have extreme value outside of the commission for their expertise. So.
Well, I mean, were they analysts? I mean,
Dan was a
okay.
Georgia
Yeah,
Tech
that's what I'm talking about.
engineer.
At what level were they there with the? I mean, are we talking about secretaries? Or are we talking about higher levels? What I'm asking.
The most recent 3, 2 were accountants that were actually on the plant Vogel 1 and 2 when it was built. So they were here 34, 35 years. And they retired in December. The one that retired in November was a lower level. He's not a degree person, but he worked himself up to various jobs, and he was very involved in all of our filings that we have to deal with, and are keeping all of the records straight for outside parties and also our web site and things like that. But that's just a small example. We've seen several people over the last 4 years leave, some of which we were able to backfill, and for the most part, we have not been able to backfill because every time we lose somebody, the budget's always tracking down. So we had about 114 years of service walk out in the last quarter of 2012 and experience. So, it mounts up, and, we're not able to bring new people in. And, years ago, in 2008, we canceled our program that we were bringing interns in from Georgia Tech and Georgia State to learn utility regulation. And matter of fact, 3 of our younger folks that have 10 to 12 years came through that program, and we got to know them, and they made a good impression. We hired them, and I think they're all double E's, so they're well educated, and they're in high demand outside of the state, of course, because of their experience and also their degrees. But we do our best to make it a good environment for people to work in, even though sometimes it's very stressful. But it is that way. I worked for AT&T for 31 years, so I can tell you about the stress. So especially when all your losing stock goes down the toilet. But that's
we can all understand that.
But it is what it is. It's simple math. 1% is $79,635.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
coming,
again.
and look forward to seeing y'all in the next week or 2. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
for your support.
Department of Transportation. You can stand up, Commissioner Golden, if you'd rather, but
Just sitting down's nice.
Thank you. We have Commissioner Keith Golden and Angela Whitsworth, the
Right.
treasurer of DOT.
And I'd also like to recognize we have two of the people that do all the work, Selena Helms and George, sitting back there taking. They did all the work.
Oh,
so.
they did all the work.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
good. It's good to have y'all here.
All right, you want us just to jump in with our 13?
Yeah, and I think we all have your handout. I got it right here. Is this the same handout you did for the big committee?
Generally speaking, yes, ma'am.
I mean, for the joint committee.
ma'am.
Okay.
And we did leave a couple little quick reference guides on our 13 program so that you could have if you're interested. But kind of as we started at the joint committee the other day, certainly the Department of Transportation is really transitioning into an organization that has to do a lot more contract management and do a lot more outsourcing of our work. And that's one of the ways we're meeting our core functions, as we mentioned to the other day. We have a lot less employees than we used to have. And working with you guys, we're going to continue to move forward on the best way to deliver our core functions and make sure the roads are in good shape. Probably your second slide, state motor fuel collections, which should be the slide with the graphs. And as y'all already know, the way our budget works is the previous year's motor fuel collections is what we spend in the year we're actually in. And so the chart that you see there actually demonstrates the year that the funds were actually collected. So for FY12, you saw that we collected a little over $1 billion, $1,013 million. And our budget was based last year on a little over $969 million. And so our request today is to amend in $43 million into our 13 amended budget. Turn to the next slide, you'll see our GDOT debt service payments. And that's one of the things that's really a hamstring for the Department of Transportation right now, as y'all already know. The blue chart demonstrates the GO bonds that are out there, which is $193 million for the FY13. The red actually shows the GRB bonds, the guaranteed revenue.
Excuse me just a minute. We've got some new people on the committee.
Sure.
Do you mind explaining what these bonds are?
Sure.
Because we've got several new people that might not, about 4 new people on the committee. If you'll explain what the bonds are, what
Okay.
is GO bonds
I'll
stand
take
for.
my best stab at it,
Okay.
and then I'll let the treasurer fill in where I miss.
Okay.
The GO bonds are bonds that are sold traditionally by the legislature themselves to be backed by the legislature for roadway projects. Most of these funded our Fast Forward program that was done several years ago. Predominantly is what these funded. That's the ones in the blue. That's debt service that is being paid back by motor fuel, even though they're general obligation bonds. The GRB bonds are sold to fund projects. But what all projects do we actually?
Those are the guaranteed revenue bonds.
But what?
They're basically, let's see, I'm trying to think of some of the projects that make up the guaranteed revenue bonds. They're actually back, they're sold, let me go back to this. On the GO bonds, the debt service is paid through GSFIC, the Georgia State Finance Investment Commission. Okay, the guaranteed revenue bonds and the Garvey bonds that the commissioner will get in to are basically backed, and you'll see a program that says payments to CERTA, and we pay our debt payments are paid through CERTA's budget, in that payments to CERTA category. The GRB bonds, yes, thank you, the arterial projects, and then on the Garvey bonds, you want to get into the governor's initiative on the Garvey bonds?
Well,
Fast Forward part, you want to get into that?
certainly. In the well, that actually is where we've sold federal dollars. We bonded federal projects, and we're paying back federal portion with the federal program, 80%, and then you see the motor fuel match for those particular projects.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
now? Have your debt service on these bonds always been paid out of the Department of Transportation's revenue, or was they ever paid in any other way?
You know, it's my understanding prior to 1991, the GO bonds were sold by the legislature, or done by the legislature, and paid back by general funds.
General funds
Correct,
paid them back.
prior to 1991, and that mostly funded the governor's road improvement program at the time. We were going along funding projects. Y'all were selecting projects, and we were advancing those projects, and you were funding them. In 1991, as we were getting ready for the Olympics, the decision was made maybe for 1 year could we pick it up with state motor fuel, and I think at the time it was $19 million in debt was what the number was, and we did it, and it's never gone back. So it's been, all the debt service has been picked up by state motor fuel since then, our federal dollars.
Well, okay. All right. So the 91, I mean, y'all just did it for 1 year, and it was 19 million, and now,
Well, that was a 1-year request, and then it's always stayed on the motor fuel side. So we've been using motor fuel to pay back the GEO bonds.
okay. What percent of your budget goes to pay debt?
We're right at 30%, roughly 30%. If you take our Garvey and our federal dollars as well as that. So
Just on the GEO bond side alone, roughly in the 13 amended, 24% of that is just roughly 24%.
that's motor fuel.
Is motor fuel back. One of the caveats is on the federal side of that, if you see on the yellow part, the graph, the 185, the bulk of the 185 is the federal share. It's roughly a little bit over $150 million is the federal component of that, and the difference is the actual GEO bond component. So in our budget, basically we have over a $2 billion budget, which of that federal funds is roughly around 1.2 billion make up our budget. So you can see in that component. One of the things that the commissioner may caveat is that the requirement on the Garvey bonds is that you have to pay your Garvey debt service is the first thing that comes off the top of your federal program. So before you can even do a federal project that gets appropriated, you've got to pay your Garvey debt service for that year. So that comes right off of your apportionment level on your federal program.
And a lot of our dollars are transferred straight to the State Road Toll Authority and GISPIC without ever coming through us. So.
Well, I just sort of think of when you have running a household, if you had 30% that you had to pay in debt service, it would sort of put
It's a challenge.
a challenge
Yeah,
in your
in
budget.
fact, if you were to look at if you were to look at our debt service to start with, and then you were to look at what's set aside for the local maintenance improvement grant program, and then what we can use to match the federal program, there are very few dollars left. Yeah.
What would you like to say, Representative Lyon?
I know some people wish they could get that.
Good point.
Well, it sounded like a lot to me.
But you'll see on the 13 slide, in 13 we had a drop in the GRB debt to 28 million, and that was due to some refinancing and some other things. But as we move forward in 14 and 15, those numbers returned back to around $44 million, and we don't really see any significant debt relief until probably 2018, 2019.
2019 when the first Garvey series goes out.
2019.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm looking at your 2019. It's still 124 million.
You have to pay. Yeah.
If you take all of our debt combined with the federal piece and the state piece, the first significant drop would be on the first series of the Garvey bonds, and that first series rolls off like in 19.
But we have been working with the governor and GISPIC too on a debt management plan.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to get debt relief. Yes. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead. I won't.
Okay, no problem. On the 13 amended motor fuel budget pie chart that we've shown you, you'll see that starting in that right-hand corner, we do have about $24 million or $245 million worth of debt service, and that's the motor fuel portion only of the $1.013 billion. If you move around to the left side, you see that we've requested $192 million in basically what we call routine maintenance, $183 million in general operations, $281 million in the capital program. This capital program is our actually capacity projects in our maintenance projects where we go out and do major resurfacing and bridge work. And then the 11% for the local maintenance improvement grant program at $110 million. To break it down on the next slide, the request for the actual increase of $43 million. We start with our capital construction program, and if I'm correct, that's on your line 47.2. And we've worked with the governor's office, and we're requesting that you consider $8.8 million increase into that program. Our intention is to do that and do quick response projects. The quick response projects would be things where we actually work with our district offices and local governments to get out and do something very quickly to make a difference in traffic or safety, or in some cases emergencies, but most cases it's to get out and do something. Using these dollars, state motor fuel dollars, we don't have to dip into the federal program or use federal transportation dollars, which gives us a lot more flexibility to get things done quickly. And we've found this to be a very effective way to get in and help the smaller projects that the communities have. On the next 47, I think it's 47.4 on construction admin, you'll see a request for an increase of $3.97 million. $2.4 million of that is for we're requesting to go to state health benefits and ERS adjustments, and you'll see that scattered throughout our request. We have not made a request for those additional funds since 2009 to reflect the increases that have been picked up by the regular general fund programs. Under the next one, which is construction admin, we're requesting $1.7 million. Again, that's $920,000 in additional state health benefits and ERS adjustments, and $800,000 for our small business disadvantaged business program. I mentioned the other day that a lot of people don't know that we run the UCP for the state, meaning we have to certify all disadvantaged businesses in the state, whether you're a hairstylist, restaurant, a painter, not necessarily highway work. And we have to certify and go through the whole process of looking at your personal net worth, doing field visits to verify that you're in control of that company and making a determination on whether you're a company. We're also rolling out, we just rolled out December 1st, a small business program where you can get certified as a small business. And it's our intention to start setting aside some efforts where we can set aside projects or consultant work that only small business certified companies can go after to try to give them a level playing field. But in order to manage that program, we're having to reach out and get consultant services to keep up with that demand. As the economy's gone down, more and more people are trying to get into that pool, because in a federal program like we administer, we say our goal is 15% in the state for DBE participation. So if a contractor is required to use 15% DBE, you can participate in that narrow window of opportunity if you can get certified.
Why is that in the Department of Transportation? It seems like labor would have something to do with it.
Well, in what we found in most states, it's labeled under the DOT, but many different agencies, sometimes economic development does it. It's all over the place, and we would gladly give it up today. It is, yeah. We spend more time in the paper about this than we do about the things we do wrong and right. So, yeah, there's no doubt about it. We were in the airport thing that went on down at the airport, and so it's a constant battle. But we have seen just a tremendous level of work. And just to give you a good example, today, like disadvantaged businesses and stuff that are out there, a lot of companies in the trucking world, they're getting squeezed because most of the highway contractors are having to, basically they're trying to keep their staff on the payroll. So as they've had to compress their labor force, they've said, well, we're going to keep and do this work that they would have traditionally given out to like flat work and concrete work to disadvantaged businesses, and say we're going to let them do the trucking work. Well, what that's done is squeezed out a lot of our trucking companies around the state that are not DBEs, because all the work is going to DBEs. So we're in the middle of it no matter what at this particular time. But the certification process is it's a challenge. We have a 90-day turnaround we're supposed to do, and we're striving to meet that. We've brought in a new DBE coordinator to try to make some changes in that area. But it's an area that is a constant challenge for us, and it's an area that we get $20,000 a year, $2,000 from like 10 different jurisdictions to do this program and administer the program. So it's very much a lost leader for us. Under administration, you'll see, I think that's 47.6 for you. A $920,000 adjustment for state health benefits and ERS again. I'm sorry, I covered that one. Under local roads admin, that's your 47.8. You're going to see a request to move $4.5 million from that program. This is very similar to what we did last year. The staffing levels, people were moved to a different program, but the funds were never moved to that program. And so we've come back to you to try to amend those into a program where we can be more useful in doing that. I'll cover that later. Yeah. On our next, continuing on with that, the amended budget request, the routine maintenance program of $19.1 million. That's on your 47.12. We're asking for $11 million to be moved in for additional what we call service agreements. We're doing more and more, as I mentioned to you guys, on maintenance agreements. We've done the I-95 corridor, 112 miles, where we've turned it over to a private contractor. We're in the process of finishing a contract award for I-75 from the Tennessee state line down to the Cobb County line to let a private company take over the maintenance of it. All of our mowing contracts and rest area contracts maintenance is all privatized, and we're doing our ITS maintenance is privatized. So we're looking at the functions that make the most sense and trying to get those out. Most of our striping crews is moved over to privatization. We'll be finishing that transition this year to turning striping over to private contractors. We're also requesting $2 million to go to motor vehicle equipment purchases. We have not purchased a lot of equipment over the last few years to the budget, but we do have some needs for some specific equipment items. $2 million of that request is for what we call additional city-county agreements, and met with several local delegations today, and we continue to ask what this is where we are going to partner with local governments to take over the basic routine maintenance and mowing of some of the state routes. If they're already out there maintaining their local routes with equipment and they want to leverage that and do some more for us, then we're partnering with them, and we pay them on a per mile basis on an annual basis. And we have someone that manages that contract to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for as a state. But it's just an opportunity, if they're already out there doing that type of thing, giving them an opportunity to leverage it or use Department of Corrections type labor and stuff of that nature. We've also got a $2.8 million to fund general liability insurance. That's funded through the Department of Administrative Services through a risk pool. That money's been exhausted, and so they've asked us for a contribution back into that program, and we are one of the big contributors to the risk in the state with our transportation system. And then $1.19 million in the state health benefits and ERS. Under traffic management, 47.13, you see a request for $9.13 million for Department of Public Safety Trooper School agreements. I mentioned we worked with the governor's office about 2 years ago to do something what we call the open roads policy. And the open roads policy is set on making sure that we get out and get these accidents out of the roadway as quickly as possible, getting traffic moving again, and making sure we reduce the number of secondary crashes that happen in those backups. It's very difficult when you work with a lot of small jurisdictions like in Metro Atlanta, small police departments. Their focus may not be to get out there and do that and get that road open. And so what we did is we worked with the governor's office to come up with a program where we would hire some troopers, send them through trooper school, and dedicate them for routes that would move traffic and help us manage traffic. And the first trooper school has already graduated. The second trooper school is in. And so far they're up in Cobb County operating on I-75, and it's been very successful so far. The last part of that request is for $5.1 million for a new commercial vehicle enforcement agreement with the Department of Public Safety. We've been working with OPB and the governor's office, and the importance of maintaining our assets and keeping the way stations open so that we protect our assets so that overweight trucks are not damaging our roadways. GO bond debt service. This is a transfer of a negative amount of $26 million, and this is from the what's referred to as the I can never get this exactly right, but the debt service sinking revenue reserve fund. And these funds would be transferred, and you see the line item below that, it would be a payment to SRTA for debt service, and this would go to retire the debt on the bonds for the 400 toll.
Oh, we have a question right now.
Mr. Commissioner,
Yes, sir.
at one time we were given a figure. What is it going to cost us to take down this toll on 400?
Take the actual removal of the actual building themselves and stuff. We're working with Jean is actually here, and we've been working very closely with her. The fact is that we're going to minimize it. We're going to try to leave a lot of the structure in place. A lot of people don't know there's a tunnel system underneath there. There's quite a bit of stuff where the quarters were collected and stuff. So we're trying to reserve that. We're making a determination on whether we want to keep that building. But what's the number? That's $4.5 million. We're going to have to restripe the roads. Take out those booths and stuff. So.
Representative Mayo, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Commissioner, thank you for being here. This question is about the small disadvantaged businesses.
Sure.
I'm told that there are a number of businesses that may be classified as small or disadvantaged, but they're in fact very large, successful enterprises. My concern is about those companies that truly may need assistance, that have difficulties navigating through the application and process to get more access.
Cool.
And I'm just wondering how we're doing with our outreach to invite some of those companies.
Sure. Two excellent questions. Per personal net worth is one of the contributing factors in that, and that's a very difficult number to get to. People don't just lay all their cards out on the table, and we don't really have forensic accountants that are running around trying to get to the bottom of a lot of these things. But it is a challenge, and there probably are some that get through the system that probably should not be qualified or certified. Also, it's their total value of work over a certain period of time that they have to do. I mean, the goal is to graduate them out of the program, as you say. But we actually have a support services contract in place that we're actually going out, and we do reach out to smaller businesses and communities to try to make sure they know how to walk their way through that process, or we help them walk their way through the process so that they can get through the process. And part of this money will be to continue some of that support services and extend it a little bit. Again, we were very happy. We brought in a female named Kimberly King that started with us on December the 10th. And she's already done a great job. She's hit the ground running, and I think she's going to revitalize that. Our first focus area is to really create what we're calling a best practices around the country, because there are a lot of things we can do here in Georgia. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to implement it here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, do you have any examples? You're talking about privatizing some of the services. Do you have any examples you can share with us of how we're saving money? Or
Sure. And again, privatizing doesn't always result in saving money. It just allows us to use our limited resources in different areas. But the I-95 corridor is a great example, 112 miles there. The contractor bid $2.1 million a year to maintain that for us. And we have one person overseeing that project, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. If you were to look at our cost, our preliminary costs, it was about $1.9 million is what we were spending to maintain it. They're probably doing a little bit better than us, to be honest. Very fortunate in the I-95 corridor, though, that was because it was a basically newly widened road in most cases. It was in very good condition. We're not seeing such good prices on the I-75 corridor in terms of the pricing we saw, but it's very competitive. But it allows us, with our limited resources, to move those folks back and work in the counties and make sure we're doing the things on the 2-lane state routes and the 4-lane state routes with our smaller head count. Striping would be another area. We've already done a tremendous amount of work in the striping arena, where we're transitioning out our staff and already kind of subsidizing it with contract stripers, and it's gone over so well. So we're moving fully in that direction. So all of our striping in our state will be done probably by July by contractors. The danger is all of our work will be done by contractors. We won't have the equipment any longer, and so we'll have to watch that very closely. But once you get in that business, or get out of that business, you're all in, and it's hard to move back. And we're looking at mowing, how we can get out of the mowing business is another area we're looking at. One of the ones that's worked probably the best for us is our ITS maintenance, all the cameras and signs and video detection that you see around Metro Atlanta. We were trying to do that with our own staff, and we could not be competitive. I mean, we can't pay the salaries. We didn't keep the equipment up, and we privatized all that, and we paid for that to be done. And now upwards of 95% of the devices are up all the time. So it's a trade-off at the end of the day. But we're trying to pick the things that make the most sense.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, let's jump into our state general fund portion, which is the amended 13 budget recommendation. Our total budget reduction, you're going to see, is a 10.3% reduction from the governor's recommendation in what we consider our intermodal programs. Airport aid, we'll start with airport aid, which is should be your 47.1, line 47.1. That's a $125,000 reduction. The reduction will basically eliminate the department's ability to match approximately $2.5 million in FAA funding.
Just a minute, we have a question.
Okay.
27. I mean,
I think I was trying to turn it off.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have a question on airport aid.
Okay.
How much do we get from airport aid right now?
From the federal?
From the federal.
If you look at the FY13, in FY13, the federal portion of it's $54.5 million, and the state piece is $2.4.
So we got 54.5.
And 13 from FAA.
Okay.
The airports that we won't be able to do, we'll be deferring them to 14 under this. We'll be deferring Dublin, Toccoa, Quitman, Sylvester, Adele, and the LJ airports. state funding, so we'll be deferring those to 14. We do have 104 publicly owned airports.
Could you repeat those, please?
Yes, ma'am. Dublin, Toccoa, Quitman, Sylvester, Adel, and LJ. They'll just be deferred to 2014. Most of you know that the airport aid changed last year when the FAA passed their transportation bill. It used to be 95% federal, 2.5% local, 2.5% state. It's now a 95-5 match. We still got some blended projects though that are, with that match.
So we could pay $125,000 and get $2 million.
Eligible for 2.5 additional million.
2.5 million. Is that a good? I mean,
I think airports are very instrumental in particularly the economic growth of our state. I think we've shown y'all through several reports that we've done that there's a tremendous
2.5 million. That sounds like a lot, just that you can get for $125,000.
Last year, y'all amended in and added an additional 500,000 in 13.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. On the port side, you see a reduction of 105,000. That just aligns us with what we pay in property tax over to the state of Savannah.
Are there any other cuts in ports except the property tax?
South Carolina. Yeah. What was that?
Was there any other cuts in ports
No, ma'am.
except the property tax? Okay.
The rails.
Representative Black has a question.
Back to the airport aid, is that projects that you're rolling into the next year, is you're going to be any lost money then from the federal side associated with that?
Yeah, we certainly. I mean,
and so if we could come up with 125,000, we could get that 2.5 million this year, and then pick up what we got allocated for next year.
that's
Okay.
yeah. There, of course. Yeah, we have a significant cut in 14, though. Actually, a bigger cut in 14 than 13. So, yeah. Okay.
Did they go up any? Last year we saw a big increase that South Carolina gave us in the ad valorem tax.
Down a little bit. Yeah.
It went down a little.
Yeah,
bit.
we're up to 680,000.
649, the actual property tax bill we paid in January was 649, 142, and 99 cents. What actual that was.
Okay, on the rail side, we're have a reduction of $234,000, but that's really because we haven't been able to fill our rail planner positions. We just haven't been competitive in getting people to come to work for us for the salaries we're offering. That is restored in 14. And then on the transit side, that's $327,000, which basically we're kind of in a unique thing in FY13. We still have some ARA funds left over from the ARA program, and we're able to fill in those on that. They can close that gap. But it really did effectively cause the stability to lose the match to $3.27 million in federal program.
Well, let me ask you something on the rail. Do you get any federal money on the rail?
Yes.
What's the match on rail?
Mostly we're getting earmarks and some other programs, so we don't get a huge rail program. We have an earmark for the Atlanta to Chattanooga high school. It's actually the maglev study. We have several of the what we call feasibility studies that were funded for the high-speed rail corridors and things throughout the state.
Okay.
It's an 80-20. It's 80-20 match. And that wraps up our 13 amended requests.
Why did y'all have to take a 10.3% reduction versus a 3%?
I can't answer that one. I just know that that came from the governor's recommendations. We were requested to take a 3, which is what we submitted in our recommendation, but it came out at 10.3.
Any other questions? Thank you, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. We're just moving right along. We're just sorta. Thank you, Director Evans, and we appreciate you coming and tell us a little bit about your budget.
Ours is actually very simple, Madam Chairman. Thank y'all for having me here, and glad to answer any questions you have. If you reference your tracking sheet, page 12, item 47.15, it's one simple line item on payments to CERTA. The changes from last year and the changes in from last year's budget. It's a $26.9 million add. And we also handed out some general information about what that $26.9 million add is in reference to. On page 3 of the presentation we gave you, it basically is a payment to pay off a $40 million toll revenue bond that was issued 3 years ago. So we issued $40 million in toll revenue bonds to pay for the I-85 Georgia 400 interchange project. And through some refunding of some general obligation bonds that had variable rates, we set those and fixed those rates and generated, GSFIC generated about $44 million in savings. So of that $44 million, this is a payment, a transfer of $26.9 million of that to CERTA to pay off the outstanding debt for that $40 million bond issue. So over the past 3 years, what we've been doing has been making annual payments, and the amount that's left, if you flip to page 4, is literally $32 million that's left in principal and interest on that $40 million bond, and that $26.9 million will be paid to CERTA, and we'll turn right back around and pay that to a trustee to pay off the Georgia 400 bonds. And we have the remainder of our funds that were set up for annual debt service in our previous year's budget that will make up that difference. So ours is very, very simple. It's to pay off the Georgia 400 $40 million bond.
We have a question from Representative Roberts.
Gina, at one time we had talked about there was a penalty for paying off the bonds early. Are we past that point now? So we're not taking a penalty by paying them off early?
No, sir. We actually, when we issued those bonds, we put in a 3-year call, and the 3-year first date of the early call is December 1st of 2013. So we'll actually put the money in escrow a day or two before, because December 1st actually falls on a Sunday this year. And so we'll put the days in escrow with a trustee and make that payment about the 28th, 29th, and the first day we can pay it is the 1st. So probably go in actually on the 2nd. And
you said a while ago, 4.5 roughly to
Yes,
take
sir.
down.
Yes, sir. That includes, a lot of people don't understand that it's not just a toll plaza building. That toll plaza has an extensive tunnel system with all those cash lanes have an entrance into that tunnel. So there's 16 entrances into the tunnels across that whole toll plaza area. So all of that has to be covered for safety reasons, and then we either have to restripe or we have to go in and ensure that area is closed off so people can't access that tunnel. We would like to leave that tunnel out there. We think that's very important for long-term GDOT needs for ITS for telecommunications in that corridor.
Have we seen an increase, or I mean, what do we expect as far as the increased traffic on 400 by us taking down these tolls? I mean, it's already almost a parking lot. I mean, are we going to
Yes, sir. I've been lucky enough to travel that corridor almost twice a day for a long time, and yes, sir, it's pretty seriously congested. We've done a study with Jacobs Engineering, and they anticipated about an 18% increase in traffic in that 6.2-mile tolling section when tolls come down. We've also looked and worked with ARC, and they expect somewhere between a 10 and 12% increase in traffic. So the numbers can be somewhere between 10 and 18% increase in traffic.
And the money from the tolls originally, if we had continued them, would have been used for the upkeep 400. Now we're going to have to use those monies to come out of general funds or motor fuel tax dollars.
Out of motor fuel tax dollars, yes, sir. We actually put about $61 million into the Georgia 400 corridor last year off of toll revenues. So that $40 million toll revenue bond plus about $22 million that we generated from tolls went back to make improvements in the corridor. We contracted with GDOT to perform that work in the corridor, and those projects are darn near complete. One of dear to Commissioner Goldeney's heart is a third lane at McFarland, some study for additional lanes on Georgia 400, and several improvements up and down the corridor.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I know I'm just trying to get my feel about exactly what you do. After this bond is paid off, we tear up the road, restripe it and everything. How many other toll roads do we have in the state?
We just have one on I-85. It's the I-85 express lanes.
So what will you do after this?
Well, a large piece of what we do is not actually just the tolling piece. There's two sort of large sections of what we manage at SERTA. First is the financial section, and the second is the tolling section.
The financial section, you won't have any more bonds, right?
Yes, ma'am, we will. We have about $1.4 billion left in guaranteed revenue bonds and Garvey bonds.
Okay, so you manage all the bonds.
We manage the Garvey bonds and the guaranteed revenue bonds. Your budget numbers, if you look at the governor's recommendation, there's about $237 million for debt service that GDOT pays to us, and we handle all of those transactions with the trustee and make those payments on the Garvey and the GEO bonds.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I probably should mention that as well. We are actually in design with GDOT on 2 additional toll roads right now, the Northwest Corridor project, and we are working on that project jointly with them, and also the 75 South project that will be a tolled project as well, in addition to the I-85 Hot Lane extension projects that will be north of where we currently operate the toll lanes also. So all of that should be online in the next few years.
Now the 75 toll, did you say 75 South?
Yes, ma'am. There's a 75 South project and a Northwest Corridor project
What
as
is
well.
the 70? I mean, since I go down to 75 South all the time, just tell me what is.
That's right. We can offer you a peach pass today.
Can you
yes,
do
ma'am.
it by Eagles Landing?
Actually, that's where it is. Yes.
Oh, it is?
Yes, ma'am. It's about 12 miles in that area. So yes, ma'am, it is actually in that area.
That's where we always get bogged down on the way home.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So, any other questions for Ms. Evans? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I just probably told her that. All right. Let's see. Who do we have? Forestry. Forestry. Does everybody have forestry's?
Outside page should be.
Thank you, Representative Harris, for coming. Not Representative, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Robert Ferris, State Forester and Director of Georgia Forestry Commission. And for the new members, the vision of the Georgia Forestry Commission is to ensure that Georgia maintains healthy, sustainable forests, providing that clean air, clean water, and abundant forest products and jobs. not only today but for generations to come. And I thank you for the opportunity to review our budget and request your support for the governor's proposed budget. I also want to thank you for your support over this past year. The bond dollars you and the governor provided this past year have allowed us to replace some old, worn-out firefighting equipment, including 10 crawler tractors, 11 truck tractors, and 9 trailers. We've provided you with 3 documents. The first is a budget history. We provide this document because invariably this answers a lot of questions we end up receiving. And Madam Chair, I hope you appreciate this as much as I do. Our CFO, Dan Gary, who's with us, likes to squeeze as much information as he can on a page. So
I
we managed to
appreciate
get
you enlarging it.
to take a little off and blow it up there. But in a nutshell, some of the primary points on that document is looks at our budget history and shows since 2009 we've had budget reductions of 23.5%. Looking back over the past decade, we have 40% fewer real dollars today than we had a decade ago. So that's a couple of major points on that. And we've been committed to helping the state meet the economic constraints during this budget downturn. We've closed 17 offices, cut state funding for 111 GFC positions, leaving us with 572 positions today. But this hearing's not about looking backwards, it's about moving forwards. So the next document in your package is a NOAA drought outlook for the next several months. And wanted to get this in your hands. This has changed radically just over the past couple of weeks here, looking at the drought outlook from January 17th out through April 30th. And drought is projected to be ongoing through the majority of Georgia, and is projected to persist or increase throughout South Georgia. We've been really fortunate this past year. Our fire numbers are actually down 22% because of the timing of the rains that we have received this year. But looking at this drought outlook, we are preparing for extreme wildfire activity, similar to the record-breaking years that we had in 2007 and 2011. The third page in your package is a summary that provides the details of how we're implementing our reductions, and this document corresponds to page 34 of your House Budget, House Bill 105 tracking document, page 34 of your tracking document. The first item are the common changes across all agencies, liability and telecom changes. I don't think there would be any questions on that. The second line, 25.
Well, your expenses on telecom really have gone up, haven't they?
Yes, ma'am, and those are the funds that we are paying to GTA to operate.
Okay.
And I think those are uniform across the agencies, I believe.
Okay.
The second line item, 2511, under administration, is a cut of $51,000, and what that is cutting funds for our rapid process improvement position. What this is a business process manager that's coordinated multiple improvement projects and enhancement projects for the Forestry Commission. Everything from converting 13 separate fire dispatch and permitting offices down to 3, to improving and enhancing our seedling ordering process, delivery process, fire reporting, forest management reporting, automating our time and exposure reports, a variety of things. And we do have one position remaining in this program with this cut. So we'll continue our efforts in enhancing our programs and improving our efficiencies. It'll just be on a reduced level. Under forest management, 2521, cut of $51,000. This year we've been able to redirect a Forest Service grant to pay for one of our Sustainable Community Forester Program foresters. Sustainable Community Forestry Program over the past couple of years, we've been focusing that more towards wildland urban interface. And what that is where our communities meet wildlands. That's particularly hazardous wildfire area. It's probably worth pointing out that this past year, while our fire numbers were down 20%, we still lost 706 homes or structures to wildfire. At the same time, we protected and saved over 4,600 structures and homes.
You lost 706 homes this year.
716 homes and structures, either lost or damaged.
Madam Chair, may I interject a question?
Yes.
And you said in a down fire season.
Yes, and to reduce our fire numbers were down 20% this past year.
You lost 700 plus structures.
Yes, sir. Normally that figures in the thousands.
Where were those homes generally located? In urban areas or rural areas?
Or urban interface areas, typically.
Urban areas.
Our fires don't make the news big time like you see in Oakland, California, and some of the things you've seen. Normally our home losses are individual structures out in rural areas versus entire neighborhoods that you see so frequently in Florida and some of the other western states.
Well, 716 homes to lose this year, it seems like a lot of homes to me.
Now that's homes and structures, improved structures like barns, homes, garages, outbuildings.
Okay.
It is a lot any way you look at it. But,
well, y'all, this 25.2.1, so y'all will be able to keep that position open with federal money.
yes, ma'am, we will be able to do that this year.
Okay.
We won't have those funds next year. We've seen a $1.2 million federal budget cut to the Forestry Commission, and we know more is coming down the line there. And then additionally, with additional fringe benefit increases really over the past few years here, where we're paying more into state health and retirement benefits, we don't receive state dollars for those increases to federally funded positions, so we have to pull those out of state personal services dollars when we see those increases. For example, in this case, with the people we have on federal funds this upcoming year, we'll have to find an additional $105,000 to pay those increases to fringe benefits that we've seen across the state.
105?
Yes, sir. And that's why I say we know we won't have those dollars available this upcoming year in 14. And the governor's office has worked with us on that position and does not show up in the 2014 budget.
Yes, Representative.
We, several years ago, I know we dealt with this at the time about moving employees within forestry. And we had discussions moving them from state to federal dollars. Is this now the impact that we're seeing is those that we moved, the same positions that we moved over to federal is now with the federal cuts coming down, we've got to move them back to state. Is that correct?
Well, we don't have the state dollars to move them from federal
Sure.
back to state.
But I mean, that's what we'd have to come up with, the 105,000.
Well, the 105,000 is simply the state fringe benefits that we'll have to pay these full-time people on federal dollars.
So how many do we have employees, and I can't remember off the top of my head, that we moved over to federal dollars from state dollars that now will possibly be coming back, or that may even lose their job? But I mean, how?
About 46 folks that we've
So-
moved over to federal funds.
So we're talking about the possibility in a department that's already depleted of taking 46 employees and moving them on unemployment.
Potentially, we don't know, none of us know what the federal cuts are going to be coming down. Like I said, this year we received $1.2 million in federal cuts. We're anticipating something similar in 2014, but we don't know. We won't know until Congress does something with the budget cuts.
Well, I know and you hadn't gotten there next, but you're about to get there. In your next line, you're talking about 17 positions, 2 of them being welder positions that help keep the equipment going, but we're talking about 15 firefighters that we're going to eliminate those positions. Are those included in that number, or are those additional to those 46 or 44?
No, those positions are not on federal funds.
So those
I'll
are.
go ahead and jump into that.
Sure. I mean, but as you go into it, I mean, I guess I'm asking the question. So in other words, we're looking at the possibility of 44, 46 people, 40 employees, plus an additional 15.
17 total.
17. I mean, and I know welders are important, but I mean, firefighters are, very important, especially, luckily we've had a good year this past year. But, in the last couple of years, we haven't, and we could very well get back to there. So we're possibly looking now at 57, including the 2 welders, that we're now going to eliminate their positions, depending on what happens with feds. And I mean, I get that part as far as those go, but I mean, right now, who knows what's going to happen in Washington? I agree with you.
Well, the numbers are really greater than that, and I need to explain.
Sure,
that.
I mean,
And
please
it's
do.
Okay, to jump into that next item, the 2531.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
688, $688,000 cut. That's cutting funding for 12 firefighter positions. What that amounts to is 3 chief ranger positions and 9 ranger positions, firefighters, each of those. 2 years ago, in an effort to be more effective and efficient with the dollars that we had, what we did was took the dollar amounts, personal services dollars that went to these positions, and what we did was hired 63 temporary day labor firefighters. What we're trying to do is take those dollars, stretch them further, so we hired 63 firefighters this past year that only come in when the workload demands it. Basically, we get about a 3-to-1 return by doing that. Yes, you lose some value of the full-time equivalents. It's a lot harder to manage the program, but just like Sears or Walmart, during the busy season, you bring more folks in, part-timers. So that's what we'd be losing with this cut.
So we're talking about 63 part-time.
Yes, sir.
40 possibly moving over from federal.
Yes, sir.
15 firefighters, 2 welders. I mean, with all due respect, and I told you last year, you gave a great presentation. You come in here and laid it on the line. That's what I want you to do this year. I mean, we're about to, in essence, in my opinion, gut our department with what I'm seeing here as far as terms of safety for our citizens of this state when it comes to firefighters and forestry.
Yes, sir. We're doing everything we can to stretch the appropriations as far as we can. As you've seen in the bullet item, we're talking about eliminating additional 3 full-time ranger or firefighters position with that. The way we're trying to work around that shortfall with firefighters, we're cross-training all of our employees. My administrative assistant, our communications director are now firefighter certified. Our foresters are getting firefighter certified, trained to operate our engines, where we don't pull somebody off of a crawler tractor to operate an engine. We'll have to find ways to replace these 63 supplemental firefighters. That may mean holding openings, FTE openings, to try and divert those funds back over to that position. Other alternatives, we're using Department of Corrections more frequently with our hand crews. Of course, in 11, we brought the Department of Transportation bulldozers in to help with mop-up. And ultimately, if fires activity picks up beyond capacity, we contract with other states' forestry agencies to send fire crews in. We did that in 2007 and 2011, brought in literally thousands in each of those years of firefighters to help with the fire situation. If we get to that point, we obviously don't have funds to bring those folks in. The cost to do that is about 3 times what it cost us to use the supplemental firefighters.
Wait just a minute. To bring somebody in out of state, it costs about 3 times more.
Yes, ma'am. The average, and Dan's worked up the figures, is about $26 an hour. Our rangers' median salary is $14 an hour, $14.30, and then you have to pay travel expense and per diem to bring those folks in.
Well,
Representative Number, did your light was on?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. When you look at bringing somebody in from out of state, and they're making that their salary margins that much higher, and going down and witnessing what you guys and your department has dealt with in these forest fires, that morale killer turns into a factor. And this isn't so much of a question. I want maybe affirmation if I'm understanding it right. The morale goes down tremendously with our own agency firefighters, as it would with any of us. If you know somebody's coming in doing the exact same job you're doing, and they're making a tremendous amount more money than you are for the same life risk scenario you're putting yourself in. And furthermore, if you can remind me the numbers, how many cooperator bulldozers there used to be in the state of Georgia, and how many there are now that we can call in within the state?
In the early 90s, we had 169 industry crawler tractors that were cooperators. They had fire plows on the back of their bulldozers, and responded side by side with us, came into the offices, and were on call and standby with us on high fire danger days. So we've gone from 169 down to 12 industry tractors now.
Madam Chair, may I continue? Madam Chair,
go ahead.
May I continue? Thank you. All right, so we went from 169 to what was that number?
12 is what we have
12.
now.
Okay, so we went down from 169 cooperator bulldozers with fire plows down to 12 in the state. We're paying out-of-state folks a tremendous amount more money coming into our state to fight, paying those folks more than our own agency workers are getting. And in the interim of all that, we're seeing the fuel loads in the forest increase tremendously, if I'm understanding the Flatwoods of Georgia correctly, from what I see and what Chairwoman Houston and a majority of this panel have seen.
Well, you might better explain fuel loads.
Fuel loads are the amount of, okay. The fuel loads the amount of,
Representative Clark might not understand.
It used to be a rural area where I live.
So the fuel loads are the amount of vegetation that's dried and combustible out there in the forest. So the amount of fire density is out there a lot greater than it was, and the amount of bulldozers to fight are a lot less. And we're asking you to fight these fires, paying people less than we're going to pay them from out of state when we have an incident. And in the meanwhile, you're stretching out your dollars, and we all appreciate and respect. I think we're asking too much. And I think that to not belabor the point Chairman Roberts was making, but my utmost respect to you and your department, and I think we've got to find a better fit for your budget than what we've got now. I think, to say it at the least, and I'm just trying to. You're being very gracious in your presentation. I feel. I think we're asking way too much and not giving enough for the protection y'all give. 700 plus structures in a down fire season. I think we need to give you more resources to do more with.
Thank you. Representative Valnetz, was your light on?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I thought I got them mixed up. I thought it was the others. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As we talk about reducing the census, your workforce census, you talk about 63 temps, 17 under 2531, and 40 from the feds. What's the total census of the Georgia Forestry Commission? How many employees, how many firefighters are we talking about? And what? And that percentage of loss of,
We have 572 positions currently. Since 2009, we've cut state funding for 111 positions. Now, of those 111, the numbers that Dan presented are 40 are moved over to federal funds. So 572 current, we've cut 111 since 9, and of those 111, we've put 40 over on the federal dollars to retain them.
and the 980,000 agency net loss cuts for this budget cycle, does that reflect 3% of what percentage of the?
Yes, sir. It's slightly over 3% for this FY13.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair, to address, didn't get back to answering one of Representative Nimmer's questions regarding pay of our folks, and we have had these discussions with the governor's office and OPB, and we all recognize the situation with the pay parity with our firefighters. When you look at our $14.30 hour median salary for our firefighters, comparing that to industry through the governor's workforce development program, they've recently come out with median salaries and jobs. Looking at industry, heavy equipment operator median is $21 per hour. CDL operator, truck driver license, is $18 an hour. That's $15,000 a year less than what looking at as industry medians. And at the same time, you know, our firefighters have to procure and maintain firefighter certification and training. They have to maintain and procure CDL licenses. They have to pass a physical work capacity test every year. They have to strap 20 pounds on their back, go 2 miles in 30 minutes. Try it. It's not easy. They have to do it from day one. They have to do it at year 30 as well in order to retain their job. Our firefighters take comp time, don't receive overtime pay. They're putting their lives on the line day in and day out. Not only the immediately threat of fire, but also the long-term impacts of being in smoke for extended periods. So pay parity is something we need to look at and consider. We realize this ain't the year to do that, but we've got to look at that issue as soon as we can. And we pay a tremendous amount. We're going to see a big turnover in our firefighters as these CDL and equipment operator jobs open up in the state. We'll see a big turnover with our firefighters. It costs us about $35,000 per firefighter to hire and train and get them to the level where they can respond on their own to fire. So I did want to kind of follow up on that. Also on the fuel loading, all of the meteorologists, climatologists, U.S. Forest Service, there's a lot of reports out there that are saying this is becoming the norm for the next couple of decades. Whether you lay it on climate change, cycles, and we've seen it in 7 and 11. We're going to see it again in the near future. Increased fire activity, greater threat to our citizens and our firefighters. So.
Representative Lang.
One of the things that I haven't heard you comment on, Director, is in connection with having to bring in these outside firefighters is the drop in the number of industry tractors that's been available to, I mean, not only does the state drop its numbers, but the industry has lost a lot of equipment. I think people need to hear that. And
yes, sir. That was the figure where we had 169 industry cooperators in the 90s, and we're down to 12 now. And that's bulldozers with fire plows on the back of them. Our tractors have dropped here recently again from 9 from 333 to 325. So our tractor force has remained pretty constant over the years. It just is we've lost 150 plus industry tractors.
Any other questions, Representative Bryant? I had a question. What about prescribed burning? Does do any of these people that we're going to lose have anything to do with prescribed burning? Because I think that's one way we can really control forest fires is by prescribed burning.
Yes, ma'am. We've got a tremendous push to increase prescribed burning to reduce the fuel loads you've referenced. We developed, in conjunction with Florida, the state of Florida, a 20-year strategic plan to promote prescribed burning. Great success in the 5 years that we've had that plan and actions in place. We've increased the acres burned, prescribed burn, by 17% in Georgia, which is a huge gain. And these supplemental firefighters, that is a fantastic way to help train them, getting them out, plowing brakes for prescribed burning and assisting on prescribed burn. So yes, it does. The cuts will reduce our capacity to assist and promote prescribed burning.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, I mean, I understand you got to support the governor's budget. We support the governor and all, and I get that when you come in here. But last year, you done an outstanding job of coming in here and presenting your budget. I mean, you laid it on the line. You let everybody understand what would happen if a fire. I mean, it's bad enough when one gets out in rural Georgia, when one gets out in the metropolitan area, the damage that it would do, and the lack of resources that you have. I mean, I commend you and your department for doing an outstanding job with the limited resources. But as Representative Nimmer said, I think that we are shortchanging you to the point that I think you need to be a little more vocal about that, and I understand the position you're in. Don't get me wrong, but we need to hear it. I mean, people need to hear and understand the possibilities of what can happen. I mean, your agency has been cut severely over the last several years. Y'all have done an outstanding job of living within your means when a lot of other agencies wouldn't. And the hits now have been more severe to y'all because of being conservative in your spending and all. So I think that's another point that needs to be made as compared to other agencies. The over 3% cut this year, I mean, in my opinion, we need to be going the other way, not more than 3%. So I'd just like, especially when you come back by the 14, make sure you do like last year. You've done a great job of just, as we'd say down home, shucking the cob and laying it out on the line. And if you look at this, I think this committee, the exception of Mr. Clark down there, who used to represent a rural area, probably back when he was
Mr. Epps is not too rural right now.
very, very young, it was probably a rural area. But you've got a pretty friendly committee here that really understands this importance. I know that we hear from our foresters all the time and constituents about the cuts and what's been going down, and y'all do. You do an outstanding job with the limited resources that you have, but I think that we need to make sure that everybody understands that the forestry department is really as important as the Georgia State Patrol and those types of agencies as well as far as safety here in the state of Georgia. I mean, we've seen it in other states when fires break out. I mean, Representative Nimmer and luckily a lot of that was down in the swamp, and it hurt, but had that happened up here in the metropolitan area, it could have been devastating. So,
yes, sir. I certainly be glad to do that. We do have a presentation that compares something we mentioned a little while ago, the Eagles Landing area, to the fire activity in Bastrop, Texas this year. Very similar areas, tremendous losses, homes in the thousands and businesses, $320 million in suppression costs, and we'll certainly get that information and presentation before the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I just want to say, every time I visit my forestry department, I'm amazed at the things that y'all come up with to cut cost. It's absolutely amazing, the creativity of that y'all think about. I mean, I know in my forestry department, I don't even remember the name of the thing they're making. They're making some kind of thing that goes on a rotary mower or something, keep from buying them, and they're making them for all over the state. And when they give out pins to somebody when they retire, they're making the pins out of wood, and it's just amazing what y'all are doing to save money. And I do appreciate it.
Appreciate those comments, and I'm awfully proud of our folks. They take a lot of pride.
They take a pride in their work. And if you stop in at your forestry department, you'll see some of the things they're doing. And I hope everybody will take time to visit their forestry department when they go home, and just really see the amount of work they really are doing. And thank you.
Thank you. I guess I didn't quite get to the final line of cuts there. Line 2533, that's cutting $121,000 in operational expenses. Our plans there are to close another fire control office and reduce our fire control aviation services by reducing flight hours, fire control hours by 1,000 hours. That's an 18% reduction in our flights. And basically the plan there is to reduce fire detection flights to only the most extreme high fire danger days, into the most critical times that our air resources can assist our firefighters on the ground, and then also do as proposed savings through a statewide contract with Granger.
Do you know where that closure is going to be? You said you were going to have to close.
Yes, sir. We're working on plans, but we've not made all the necessary contacts. We really need to inform some folks of where we're moving with that. It will be in the North Georgia area.
Are you going to combine? Is that what you're doing, or you just?
Yes, sir. Combining units. We've done 17 of those, I believe, to date. Combining our fire control units into work centers. So this will do one more of those.
What is the statewide contract with Granger?
That's a contract that's been newly developed. The original proposals were, I think, to save us $116,000. Went back and looked at that, and that was dropped to $31,000. And our CFO here, Dan, says he's really projecting $11,000 savings out of that through the statewide contract, as opposed to our current purchase procedures.
What happened to the difference? What caused the difference?
There were some number crunching errors. Madam Chair, that's all of our proposed reductions.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you in a few weeks. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from us in between.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And we will we'll put out a notice about when we're going to meet again, okay? And everybody sort of look at your figures and... Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot we were meeting again tomorrow. Okay, thank you.